it's a better time now.
Yeah. Let's get into it here then, man. Here, talking a bit about the mental side of football. When you hear the words mental side of football or sports psychology or all these terms, what's like the first thing that comes to your mind?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is just the idea that pretty much 90% of the game is the mental part. You know what I mean? I think football is pretty easy. I think that the toughest part about it is everything that's going on around you. You know what I mean? Not just being a football player, but or an athlete for other people, but, dealing with your family members, dealing with every day. If you just only had football to worry about, it would be, at least for me, it'd be very easy to handle because you wouldn't have to worry about anything else. But mental toughness is the key to success in any sport and anything you do.
Yeah, and you mentioned dealing with things outside of football, and I gotta imagine that when you're playing close to home, it's a little bit easier to deal with those things. Obviously, not as easy as it is if you're at home, but someone like in your case, where you move out west, your first year in the CFL, out of the GTA, that's gotta be even harder to kind of deal with that being on the other side of the country. And Canada is not the tiniest country in the world, right? So when you go to the other side of Canada, you're a couple time zones away.
Exactly. And playing in Edmonton, obviously it was a blessing to get to go out there as a young man, but it was definitely difficult to be able to contact with people all the time. Being on a different time zone, 2 hours doesn't seem like a lot until you're 2 hours behind everybody else and they're going to sleep and you're just getting home from something. So, being in Edmonton, it was great at times when I didn't want to deal with things, but when you needed to be home to support people through hard times, I couldn't really do that. I just had to focus on what was in front of me, which was just a football field.
What was the biggest, in your point of view, what was the biggest change from CIS football to CFL football?
The physicality. I think the physicality and the length of the season, which when you're in the OUA, especially when I played in OUA, it's pretty much it wasn't very physical. It wasn't a lot of grabbing, clutching. In the CFL, when I got in there, you can pretty much hold a receiver 15, 20 yards down the field and bring him to the ground without getting a penalty. Now it's you touch a guy 5 yards, even if you touch him, it doesn't matter how, you get a penalty for it. So it was definitely different playing then and playing now. That's for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the change, like the length of the season, what number of games you play. From a mental point of view, that's so important because
so much.
You got to keep your motivation high week by week, right? Was that a tough transition for you, or how did you manage that transition from? Because I guess OUA you play with what, like 8 games?
Yeah, 8 games, maybe 10. I think like the most we played would be 10, but it was difficult. My story when I went out to Edmonton is kind of crazy because I was going through the process of possibly going to Philadelphia Eagles, and my agent and I at the time were going to stretch out that possibility as much as possible. And that kind of rubbed people the wrong way in the CFL. I actually talked to someone else about that, and because I held out for 3 days, I didn't go to rookie minicamp. So, the vets were on me because of that alone. But
you're talking about that was it Rod? You're talking about that?
Yeah, I was talking about that with Rod. Yeah, I to be honest with you, I can't even complain, man. When I got to Edmonton, Fred Stamps was right there. Darius Bowman was on the field, but Fred Stamps was like, "Don't even worry about anything. I'm going to take care of you as long as I'm here. I'm going to make sure that you learn what it's like to be a pro and what it means to, because you're extremely talented, and I want to see you do well." So I was like, "All right."
Yeah.
It wasn't great when the first the first dinner that I went to, I was the very first rookie to sing, but you got to get certain things over with.
Yeah. What song did you sing?
Find Your Love by Drake.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna pick a song to sing, that's probably one of the better ones to choose.
He wasn't the guy that he is today. That's for sure.
True.
People would enjoy it a lot more. Before, it was a little bit more difficult in terms of the Americans and Canadians, and no, everyone liked Drake, but they didn't really want to like Drake because he was Canadian and not American. So you're a lot of locker rooms turn this on, turn music on that I'm from. So it's crazy.
You mentioned AD and Fred Stamps. What were some of the biggest lessons from the mental side of the game that you took away from that first year playing with them? Because I got to imagine, as a wide receiver in the CFL, you couldn't ask for 2 better guys to learn from.
I mean, I think it's just coming to work every day. The approach that they took every day, especially mentally, there was never a dull moment with them. There was never a point where they weren't on, and being able to play with those guys, they really looked out for the younger guys that were around. And, myself, Devin Bailey, and a couple other guys that were there, I know we really got lucky with having some great vets. But I think it was just the approach of every single day. There would be days, especially later into the season, where I was like, man, I'm not even trying to be out here right now. I want to go home. It's cold. And, Fred would just come to me and say, listen, you got to come to work every single day. This is your profession now. I know that your mind's in different places, but you need to focus your mind on being where you are right now, because that's really the only thing that matters. It's tough to hear that, though, right? Because you still want to be in other places and stuff like that. And when you're away from home for the first time, obviously I went to school 45 minutes away from home, but when you're really away from home for the first time, and, I'm looking and seeing Toronto in the summertime, but I'm in Edmonton in camp during during the seasons where it would be nice there, but it's not like home, right? So it was definitely tough to manage that.
There's definitely no place like home. And even back then, I mean, things like FaceTime and whatever it may be wasn't fully developed, right?
Exactly.
So it's tough even for athletes in 2020 to be away from home with all this access technology. Back then, was it 2012 that you were into Edmonton for the first year? Had to been even tougher not having as much contact with your family.
For sure. And I don't know, I was a different kid, right? So I definitely enjoyed the contact with my family, but at the same time, I like the disconnect just because I can kind of just lose myself in my work a little bit. Right. But it was, there was a point in the season, there was always a point in every season that I was like, okay, I need to get home. I need to get home. I need to see my people.
Yeah. A couple years Edmonton ended off really well with the Grey Cup win and being named most valuable Canadian. When you get an award like that and you win the Grey Cup, talk to me a bit about what that does to your confidence moving forward. I know you left Edmonton. That I guess it'd be fall or winter, or whatever free agency is. But in the moment, what does that do to a player's confidence when you win an award like that and a championship like the Grey Cup?
Honestly. And it's funny, I have the plaque right there, but honestly, it was a surreal moment. It was really cold that night. So I was just trying to get off the field, but it to me, I look at those awards, and as much as, getting the most valuable Canadian for the game was good. I felt like I already knew who I was at that point, and I knew that I wanted to be on that level. You know what I mean? Obviously, certain things happen in your career that you can't really, do anything about, like injuries. But, I expected myself. It was funny because the night before I had two conversations. I had a conversation with Akeem Foster, who we played with in 2014. And I had a conversation with Andre Dury, who is like a brother to me. And he always supported me throughout the years. And both of them, I told them I wanted to be the top Canadian in that game. And they're like, go and get it. And it ended up coming to pass, and it ended up happening. So it was a surreal moment, but it was very, very cold. And I was ready to just run off the field. Like, oh my gosh, it was so cold.
Approaching that game with that kind of mindset of wanting to win the most valuable Canadian, did you approach that game any differently? Like your pregame routine, or like maybe a goal you set for yourself that game? Or did you really just try and approach like any other game?
I mean, at that point I was coming off of my knee. So, I had 5 games into the regular season, and they were working me back into the mix. And obviously we were a team that was I think we were on a 14-game winning streak before we won the Grey Cup. So, to get into the lineup and on that team was difficult, and I'm grateful that, the coaches and the management gave me the opportunity to play in the Grey Cup, because, not everybody gets to play, and it's a harsh reality when you actually get there that not everybody's name is going to be on that trophy at the end of the year. It's just the guys who are on the roster for that game. So, I'm thankful to be a part of that. And I believe that I deserve to be a part of it, but I'm extremely thankful to be a part of it. But the mindset was, you go into the week and you're realizing that you're not really in the game plan. You know what I mean? So I'm seeing that I'm not really in the game plan, and I'm like, what's going on?
Right.
So the craziest part about it is the plays that I made were they weren't supposed to be. I wasn't the main target on the play. I only had 2 catches in that game, which are crazy. And obviously what we'd call explosion play, because they're 20 plus yards. And both of those plays turned into scoring drives. But if you look at those plays, I was on a flat route that I was supposed to be pretty much by the sideline well before he threw the ball, but I didn't really know what was going on too much. I was just trying to flow and play. And then we were trying to set up a sluggo for Nate Kuhorn, and they just happened to leave me flat. They just left me on a double slant route to the field, and we had like a play action, and Mike just kicked it to me, and I just ran. I got going, ran, and made a play for the team. And, it ended up working out. It could have been anybody, though. At that point, I don't think I really cared about winning the award. I was just happy that the year was done, and I was tired. I was ready to go home.
That cool. Was that Grey Cup in Winnipeg, or?
Yes, it was so cold. The first quarter, there was no heaters.
Right.
So it was like, man, you're out there, you're waiting for the cup. Everyone's all the taller guys are passing. The linemen are passing the cup between each other, but they're above you. So I remember just hitting the cup and then running inside.
Yeah.
Because it was so cold, right? So, it's a real moment. It's
got to be one of those moments again where it really helps your confidence. And I want to kind of get your sense of after you left for Saskatchewan the year after that off season. I don't know how much of that decision to leave Edmonton was yours or for the Eskies or a bit of both, but walk me through a bit of that free agency process. Two things that really stick out to me with that. Number one, it was your first time in free agency, and free agency is really, you're a little bit unsure of what's going to happen. I'm not sure how quickly into free agency you sign with Saskatchewan. But number two, did you expect to come back with Edmonton the year after, given that you had such a great season with them, most valuable Canadian in the Grey Cup? Was that any of that a shock to you?
I don't. You know what? It was a shock to a lot of people that I went to Saskatchewan. Even for me, I wasn't expecting to go to Saskatchewan. I was literally sold on going to Hamilton. I'm like, man, look, I'm going to play in Hamilton. I want to be as close as possible to home. Obviously, it would have been a blessing to be able to play for the Argos, but during that time period, they kind of had their own situation sorted out. They weren't really going to play multiple Canadians at the receiver position, and I think there's some conversations that me and Chris Jones had, not anything about free agency, just about life and what I wanted to do after the 2015 year. And I told him, I'm like, look, man, I want to be mentioned with the great receivers. I want an opportunity to be great, and I want it to be wherever the person's going to allow me to be. And I've always been documented to have a great relationship with Ed Hervey, and he thought that I was planning to go back to Ontario to play, because I always, even when I was there, I would always be homesick. I was a young boy when I was the first stint in Edmonton. So, right. But as soon as free agency hit, I got the call from Chris Jones, and he's like, listen, I want you here. And I remember our conversation at the end of the year when I just told him my dreams and who I believed I was and who I wanted to be. And he's like, and I want you to accomplish that here. And I was just like, oh, shoot. And the numbers were, I mean, in the position that I was, I had to try to push the market for everybody who was coming after me. And it was a 1-year deal. So it was something that I was like, hey, man, it's a 1-year deal. You're going to the mecca of football in terms of Canadian football. If you have success there, it's going to be a really great situation for you moving forward in your career. So, my mom was not very happy about it just because she wanted me to come back to Ontario.
Yeah.
And, but, I just wanted the opportunity. We just won a Grey Cup. I believed in the coaching staff. It didn't necessarily work out the way that we thought it was going to, but the opportunity that they gave me, I'll always be appreciative of that.
When you have someone like Chris Jones calling you right at the start of free agency and telling you, we want you on our team, what does that do to your mentality and your overall confidence heading into this season?
Well, like I told Rod, he straight up said to me, he's like, we're going to win. Right. We're going to win. And from the 2014 to 15 season, as you saw from 16 to 17 with the Riders, it was the first years kind of was growing pains. You have to figure out people, you don't always get all the people that you want to get on your team. So it becomes tough. And, in 16, it was a tough year for us. It was really tough. But 17, you saw them be pretty much a play away or drive away from going to the Grey Cup. So I don't think I was wrong for going. Mm-hmm. It was just, it just didn't work out the way that I would have liked it to, at least, for sure.
When you say things aren't working out, and like you said, a bit rough start to the season, what is your day-to-day mentality to keep you pushing forward? Is it, your love for football? Is it, chasing the next team after that, like making sure you get signed by a team after that? Like, I think for a lot of athletes, the reason I ask this question is when they're going through a situation, they have a certain expectation of what it's going to be, and it doesn't go exactly to plan. They tend to maybe get a bit deflated. They tend to give up. They tend to get a bit down on themselves, right? But for you, how did you kind of stay positive in those moments?
It was tough because honestly, like even to double back, in my rookie year in the CFL, I got an early start. I started the third game of the season. I would say that I'd like to say my rookie year I had success. I had decent success, and I was coming into the next year saying like, "Hey, man," everyone was like, "Hey, you could be a 1,000-yard receiver. You can be this. You can be that." And I think I listened a little too much into what everything else was saying. And as much as I had like a really great off season, we had a fresh coaching staff and, a brand new quarterback, Mike Riley. And we didn't start off well. And, in pro football, when you don't start well, the development part is out the window for the people that you're looking to develop. You know what I mean? So I think that, I had some dropsies in my second year that really, really affected me. And at that point, I didn't really, they traded Simone Lawrence to Hamilton. And I spent a lot of time with him in our first year. Like we were together a lot, and we had a lot of mutual friends from outside of football that kind of tied us together. And when I didn't feel like I had like that home atmosphere around me, and when things were happening that I didn't think were going to happen, like dropping a ball in Winnipeg, to win the game. And literally you hear for me personally in that moment, you hear the wind being taken out of the stadium for a second because they realize the game is done. And then I drop a football and it's like I can't even describe the feeling that I had. Right. And, then going into the days after seeing, front page of the paper, me dropping a football, you know what I mean? That stuff, I would sit in the basement and just not speak to anybody for weeks and weeks. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I would say that I was going through somewhat, I wouldn't say a full depression, but I was depressed with it and I wasn't having success. So, just to go forward with, when I was in Saskatchewan and dealing with the whole situation that didn't go well, at that point, and I'll be honest with you, I've never really expressed this to a lot of people, the people who know me well. I was like, man, I'm kind of done with this. Like, I'm not really interested. I don't really like football that much. You know what I mean? It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun at all. And that was the most money I made in my career. And I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it at all. I was like, man, I would trade that for happiness. I would trade being one of the highest paid players, Canadian receivers in the league, just to be in a situation where I had people around me that I enjoyed being around every single day.
Right.
And, obviously with big price comes big responsibility. And maybe I wasn't ready, or maybe the situation wasn't right for me. So, it was tough. That 16 year after, it was difficult for me. I was at a fork in the road, and I didn't know if it was going to be play football or not.
Yeah. What eventually led you to continue playing football? Was it a particular mentor or a friend or something you just figured out on your own? How did you eventually pick it back up and play football again? To continue on with football? To be completely honest with you, it would have been crazy for me to just stop. You know what I mean? Because like you're still a commodity. You know what I mean? You're still a commodity. The pressures that you put on yourself are usually not the way everyone views it, because there's a lot of situations that are going on outside of just myself. But a lot of the time you're in your own head. So you think this is the worst thing. Everyone thinks it's terrible, but it's really just, you probably just really think it's terrible. And because you think it's a bad situation, you're going to play with it in your own head. So, I couldn't stop playing because at that point I didn't even know what I wanted to do going forward. So I wasn't in the position or ready to not play anymore. But I knew that I was coming towards the end where I realized where the shift was coming. And I was like, you know what? I don't know if this is going to be for me for that much longer.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that really popped in my head when you talked about it wasn't fun anymore is when you look at like a group of schoolyard kids, they're playing football, there seems so much happiness, right? But when you get into an adult, and it's still the same game, it's football. But when you add in all the pressure, the fans, the media, like you said, if you're on the newspaper and you see yourself dropping a ball on the front page of the newspaper, that's not easy for anybody to swallow, right? It's just interesting how a game like football that can be so fun at one person's life can kind of get turned into something else based on what other people come in and say about it, whether it's the fans, the media, could be, teammates or rivals, whatever it is. That's just really the first thing that kind of stuck out in my mind. And when I talk to a lot of younger kids that deal with the same thing, where they deal with a lot of maybe backlash from their parents or from other players, I tell them, just think about, you're playing the same game you played as a little kid, and just try and, emulate that as much as possible, and try to block out all that other stuff. It's obviously easier said than done. It's not an overnight fix to block things out, but I think that's where an athlete, that's where their most healthiest mindset is when they're able to block everything out, and it kind of feels like you're a little kid again playing that sport.
Exactly. And that's why for me, I looked at it and said, probably the most fun I had in my entire career was when I got traded to Hamilton. I was close to home, and, playing with June Jones and hearing him speak to me differently than I ever got spoken to in the past in terms of being a bigger receiver, a veteran receiver. And he instilled a confidence in me that I appreciated. And another year that was so much fun was in 2014, where we had a bunch of kids that were from the same area that I was from. And we all kind of just stuck together and just supported each other. And, when you're in pro football, sometimes you're not going to get a lot of guys who care about the people who are around. For me, because I knew what it was like to have high moments and low moments. I knew what it was like to get hurt, and I knew what it was like to be very healthy. I didn't like to, make people feel like they didn't matter when they were hurt, because I knew what that felt like, to feel like you do not matter because you're not playing, so it's tough, man. Sports are it's a mental game completely.
Yeah. I always bring it up with a lot of athletes. I bring this concept up, but it's crazy how much like sports bleed into personal life, the lessons you learn, and the lessons you learn in personal life bleed into sports as well. Like you said, even you kind of mentioned getting along with other people and come up with those tight knit communities as part of a sports team to allow you to all grow together and have some people to rely on. That's like a life skill that people sometimes can never get, right? It's just so interesting how sports can facilitate all these life skills being developed in an athlete's life. And that's why I always encourage people to play as many sports as possible when they're growing up. Put their kids as many sports as possible. Get them used to all different situations, because you never kind of know what life lessons they can learn.
Yeah, I mean, I could even sit down and say COVID-19. COVID-19 is obviously worse than being on like a 10-game losing streak in football. But I know what it's like to feel pressure. You know what I mean? And be in a situation where the people around you are getting cut. It's not the same as everything that's happening in the world today, but it's definitely going to make you think differently for when these things end up happening, because you're equipped with it. There'll be times in practice or times in the day where at a split second they're switching the whole schedule and you're doing something else. Right. So, when your life gets flipped upside down, you learn how to just pick yourself up and just keep moving forward, because you don't really have a choice. Right. Yeah. So football definitely taught me that, and it taught me some valuable lessons that I appreciate to this day. And, even my dealings in my future endeavors have definitely made it a lot easier, because I know exactly the type of people I need to be around in order for me to be successful.
Thinking about, all the years you spent in the CFL, going all the way back to Edmonton 2012 to most recently with Hamilton, is there one part of the mental side of your game that you feel has developed the most, or that you're most proud of its development from day one in the CFL to today?
Yeah, I was a extremely emotional kid, and it's something that I've definitely been working on, that, sometimes constructive criticism is the best thing that someone can do for you. And a lot of the times, it's very difficult for people to really get constructive criticism and apply it into their everyday. And, in football, you're going to get a lot of constructive criticism on a day-to-day basis. And, at the beginning of my career, it affected me. You know what I mean? If I didn't do something right, I took offense to it in the way I was being spoken to. And then, closer to the end of my career, when I did something wrong, I manned up to it and asked for questions of how I can be better, and let everybody know in the room that it's not going to happen again. It's a maturation of being a man and understanding that, there's certain things that communication errors. There's certain things in terms of communication that, you can't really point a finger at other people and say it's their fault. The reason why the situation didn't end up the way you wanted it to. It's my career. It's my life. So I have to hold myself responsible for any way that it goes. If it goes well, I'm going to obviously thank the people around me, but I hold myself responsible. And if it goes bad, I have to hold myself responsible if I want to grow. I could easily look at it and say, Hamilton cut me, blah, 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 blah. I don't like them. But I can say, you know what, maybe there was a lesson learned from the way I communicated myself during the time period. Maybe in Saskatchewan, there was a lapse of communication, which was essentially the reason why the year ended up happening the way it did. And I can't point at Chris Jones. I can't point at any of the coaches that I was working with. I have to point at myself and ask myself, how could I have communicated better for these things to be handled better? And I think it's something I'm definitely trying to understand as a man and a new dad. I want to hold myself accountable for my actions and the things that are going on around me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that a lot. And it's another kind of advice I give to some of the younger athletes is, when someone gives you a piece of criticism, don't look at the tone of their voice or don't look at like that overall context of it. Just look at the root of the criticism and what are the actual words that they're saying, because some people can take offense to it. Some coaches have different ways of delivering feedback that work with some athletes and don't work with others. But I always tell them, like, ignore all that. Just look at the core of the criticism and what it is and take it to heart and try and look at things from the coach's perspective. And if there's any sort of legitimacy to it, it's probably correct. So just take it at that.
For sure. And it's difficult because I would think, and you probably say it yourself, that you're your greatest critic.
Right.
There's literally no one who wants you to be greater than yourself. So sometimes when you're pushing so hard to reach these levels that you want to be on, and someone's saying something to you that you may need to hear, but they're not approaching it in a way that you can hear it, it's difficult. And when you're dealing with grown men, that's something that makes a great coach, is someone who understands that you can't have the same approach with every single person. But then again, you can't expect everybody to have that mindset that I have to be calm when I'm speaking to this person and I have to switch up depending on who I'm speaking to, So it's difficult. It's hard.
Yeah. I have a little game I like to play here, a sports psychology quote game. I have 17 of them. Mm-hmm. I'll get you to pick a number between 1 and 17. We won't go through all 17, of course, or we'll be here to the next Grey Cup. But pick a number between 1 and 17. I'll read you the quote, and then we'll kind of reflect on it a bit through your career and everything like that.
Okay, 17.
17. This is 17. Everyone always picks 17, but this is Tiger Woods. He said, "My instincts have never lied to me."
Yeah, I mean, if I'm correct of what he's trying to say, is his gut has never lied to him. And a lot of the times you end up failing when you double check, when you double think, when you think twice, especially in a sport like football. A lot of the times there's no time to think twice. There's no time to doubt, because once you doubt, it's over. You know what I mean? It's just like, I always tell something that me and my mom always talk about is, prayer with no action is dead. You know what I mean? If you're going to pray for something, you have to actually believe in that thing, and you have to have action and work towards it to get it. So if you say, oh my God, I want a G-Wagon, how are you, you pray that you get it. How are you going to get it if you're not acting toward in a way to get what you need? So, how I look at it is a lot of times when I double thought, like the time I told you about in Winnipeg, I dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And it was a lapse of focus. And a lot of the times we all have that struggle with the lapse of focus. But sometimes when your focus goes, it might be the worst situation that you can ever be in.
Yeah.
So, just another example is that's why they're telling us not to text and drive, because a lapse of focus could be someone's life.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if I'm correct with what Tiger Woods is trying to say, I'll definitely look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the G-Wagon thing and people focusing on the G-Wagon, not the steps to get there, when I think about that in the sports content or sports context, it's like being process versus outcome focused. So many people I feel like are outcome focused, like they only focus on those 1,000-yard receiving seasons or 50 touchdown passes a year, but they sometimes lose sight of what are the processes or the steps A to Z that they got to take to get there. And you got to really focus on the process, I feel like, as an athlete to be successful, because if you're always looking down the road at the outcome, you're going to forget all the little steps you got to take to get there.
Absolutely. I'll tell you two things that two people said to me in 2014. It was Chris Jones and it was Mike Riley. Chris Jones called me into the office one day and said, your focus is here. I needed to be right here. And at that time, I was the second leading receiver on the team behind Darius Bowman. And that was the year Darius Bowman took off. and I couldn't understand. I'm like, I'm playing well. I'm coming to practice. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. What do you mean my focus isn't where it needs to be? I'm right where I should be. Like, I'm gonna sign a great contract at the end of the year. Mike Riley said something to me at the beginning of the year. He said, the only thing you need to focus on right now is work. Don't focus on anything else, just work. And even him, I looked at him and said, it's easy for you to say. You're the starting quarterback. You've got everything figured out. And at the time, as a young, I call myself a boy at the time, I never really understood why these people were telling me these things. And now looking back, it was probably the most sound advice I could have gotten at the time. And if I took it, I don't know if I took it the way I should have taken it, maybe the direction of the way everything ended up panning out would be different. Maybe not. At the end of the day, I'm not really upset about the way that my career was. I had a great time and I accomplished things. But that's the thing. Sometimes it's difficult to understand where your focus needs to be live because there's so many distractions when you're playing professional football. There's so many distractions when you're playing at a university level. And I thought it was going to get easier once I left university because I didn't have to do schoolwork. But now your whole life is surrounded around being successful at your job. And if you can't do that, they're going to find someone else to do it for you.
Yeah. So you said no schoolwork after the CIS, but I got to imagine that learning a CFL playbook was schoolwork in and of itself.
You know what was more tough? The toughest playbook that I've seen in my pro career was Philadelphia rookie camp.
Yeah,
that was the toughest.
Imagine, yeah.
That was an offense, a West Coast offense that I've never seen before. When I played at Laurier, we didn't play in a I don't even know what type of offense that we played in, but it wasn't a West Coast offense. So it was brand new material for me. So it was tough to really know what I was supposed to do. Right. Yeah. So shout out to the receivers coach out there because he was putting me in places during rookie camp. So luckily he helped me out.
Let's do one more quote here before you wrap up. You got another number between 1 and 17?
I'm gonna go 7.
7. This is another good one. We kind of talked about this one already, but maybe give me a more specific example. This is from Doc Rivers, legendary NBA coach. He said, good players want to be coached, but great players want to be told the truth.
Yeah, I mean...
we talked about it a bit.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific example in mind where maybe a coach came to you and told you a bit of criticism that was hard for you to kind of handle in the moment, but looking back, it was maybe the right thing?
A lot of the times, the most honest coach that I've ever had was, I would say it was definitely June Jones, but he usually had a different approach. But Chris Jones, I mean, in training camp, I was rehabbing my knee, and he wanted my focus to be on my knee. He didn't want my focus, and I'm a social butterfly if you can't tell. And you come to the field and you're rehabbing your knee. Guys are on the field, yo, Mud. And I'm like, I can't talk to you right now. Like, I'm going to get in trouble if I talk to you because I'm going to be distracting you guys and you're distracting me from what I have to do. But the way I took it during that period of time, like it was punishment. But I didn't see it as in, you need to focus on working on your knee because you can't do anything for us being hurt. You can only do stuff for us when you get onto the field.
Right.
But if you're yelling at the guys on the field and breaking their focus, you're not helping us. And if they're yelling at you and you're not getting healthy with your knee, they're not doing anything for you either. So in a sense, it's in order for you to be great, you have to be told the truth. Yeah. And I think as I got a little bit older, it changed. I wanted the truth. Even now it's tough. My fiance, she tells me things and sometimes I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? But that's the closest person to me. So I should take that responsibility and take that listening and give my listening ear to it because she probably is giving me the best advice that anyone can give me because she's the closest person and sees me on an everyday basis. So I would definitely say, I definitely agree with what Doc said.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me, another thing too, you always hear it, whether it's the news or on the internet or whatever, is how people surround themselves with yes men, people that like only want to tell them yes, 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 and always kind of like suck up to them, I guess. Right. Whereas if you really want to be a good person, so to say, or really want to develop in your life, personally, athletically, whatever it is, you need to have people around you that are willing to challenge you or tell you when you're doing something that they don't agree with or something they think is going to lead you down the bad path. I think when you surround yourself with just yes men and surround yourself with people that only want to tell you what you want to hear, you don't get that other point of view that could actually help you develop.
Exactly. And I think that, putting yourself around those types of people who can mentor you in a certain way, because I feel like I don't care how old you are, you should always have someone who's done things that you're trying to do, who can tell you how you need to get it done. But I think it is extremely important to have those people who just are straight shooters with you. And, once you get that information and you hear that information, you can process it any way you decide you want to, but you should be happy that someone's taking the time to tell you the truth, because in today's day, we don't really see that all the time. A lot of people are just going to, just look at you and say, if he doesn't get it now, he'll never get it, and then just walk away.
Yeah. 100% agree with that. Last thing here before you wrap up, a couple rapid fire questions for you. We'll end this on a fun note.
All right, cool.
You got one chance, or I guess we'll put the context in. We got one night left to live. What movie are you throwing on the TV? All-time favorite movie?
Rush Hour 2.
Rush Hour 2.
At least I'm gonna smile, right?
Right. I like it. Another one here. Quarantine. We've been quarantining for a while. Some of us been eating more snacks than usual. But during quarantine, what was one snack that you really were munching on?
I can't. Is pizza a snack?
We can count it.
That's definitely something I've been munching on a lot. I'll tell you that. Ordering a pizza. You can't get out of the house, order the pizza and leave it at the front door, please.
Yeah. You got a favorite pizza joint, or is any pizza's good?
I can't say anything bad about any other pizzas, but I do really, 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 really enjoy Pizza Nova right beside my house. They just, I don't think there's a lot of movement there. So it's like always quality pizza.
You know what you're going to get when you go there.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Next one here. We've obviously been locked down in quarantine for a while, but say tomorrow Air Canada says you can get a flight anywhere in the world. Where are you going?
Man, I think if I could go anywhere in the world safely, I'd go to St. Lucia to see, so my daughter can see her grandfather.
Yeah.
So and St. Lucia is a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's definitely a place that you should go. But I would like that to happen because I have some stocks in Air Canada. So I would like them to open up their doors to push that stock back up. But yeah, definitely, I think St. Lucia is one place that I'm excited for when I get to go back.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Another question here, more to do with the CFL. You've been around the CFL for a long time, been on different teams, also seen a lot of jerseys in the CFL. What's one CFL jersey that sticks out that's a favorite of yours? Could be a team you played for, it could be a team you haven't played for.
My favorite CFL jersey. I will say that, the black and gold Hamilton Ticats, that's a classic jersey that you can never, ever say you don't want to wear. But, I'm a hometown kid. I grew up watching the Argos, Arland Bruce, and, Robert Baker. The list goes on. Damon Allen. And, I would have loved to wear that powder blue. I would have loved to put that jersey on and be in front of my family and friends eight times out of the year at least. So, yeah, I think that the best jerseys in the CFL, I like the Edmonton one too, but I would have loved to put on that Argo jersey as well.
Nothing beats a jersey that you grew up idolizing and being in love with, right?
Exactly.
And I do like the Hamilton answer, though. I mean, black and gold, you can't go wrong with that color.
Can't go wrong with that.
It goes with any fit you got. That black and gold looks nice. So
yeah, exactly. Especially on one of those Friday nights, you're wearing they're doing a blackout in Hamilton, and you're wearing all black. I enjoyed that 7 games that I played with Hamilton. I extremely enjoyed those times. It was like the beginning of their turnover. So I was happy to be a part of that.
That's awesome, man. Last question here. Obviously, we're here talking about the mental side of the game, where we talked about it today, but who do you think is one person that would be a good guest in the show? Somebody that you know personally or through football or any athletic sport that has a really good mental game, a really good story that you kind of look up to their approach to their sport?
I think Fred Stamps, Darius Bowman, Adrian Tracy. If you could get Michael Jordan on your show, that'd be sick too, because his mental game was crazy.
Yeah.
Guys like that, even G. Roy Simon, you know, a guy who's been on the top of his game. He was on the top of his game for a long time. Nick Lewis, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The list goes on. I think you know, those guys there, they definitely have dealt with adverse situations. You know, their first choice wasn't to come to the CFL. You know, they had to come to the CFL, earn their right to be there, and then to see them do everything that they did in this business, it's surreal. So there's so many guys.
Yeah.
You know, Chris Williams, another guy who's been hurt, came back from injuries, been hurt again, you know, came back from injuries. Speedy B, Simone Lawrence. There's a lot of guys that you could sit down and talk about mental health and stuff like that with them, and just the things that they've gone through that would definitely help you and bring some awareness to other people who definitely have that issue.
Yeah, it was actually one of the most eye-opening things for me is growing up, being a CFL fan and seeing all the wide receivers or players on TV, whether it was like Milt Stegall or like you said, Nick Lewis or G. Roy Simon, whoever it was, and now kind of being older and being more educated in the mental side of the game, kind of giving me more of an appreciation of what those earlier guys went on, those kind of like late 90s, early 2000s guys, because there were some big ballers back then in the CFL. And just kind of now thinking back and thinking of, you know, how much media attention they got and how much scrutiny they had by the Canadian media, and them being able to go day in and day out and still play their game, it really gives me a new appreciation for what a pro athlete is.
For sure. And people just don't forget that we're, especially those guys who are playing football for a lot. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. I don't want to talk about how much money they made during their time. They probably made a good penny, but you know, they were good enough to play in the NFL. You know, 90% of the guys in the CFL are good enough to play in the NFL. It's just situation. A lot of people up here don't really understand that. They just think the NFL is the greatest thing in the world, but don't realize that everybody who's in the CFL had some type of affiliation with the NFL. So it's the second best league in the world. You know, that's pretty good to sit down and say you're the second best in the world, right? So, yeah, man, like it was fun to be a part of that. It was fun to catch the back end of a lot of their careers, and like, you know, G-Roy and different guys like that I met throughout the time when I was in high school. So to be able to be on the same field as them, and I remember the first time I scored a touchdown in a CFL game, and the next game we were playing in BC, and G-Roy came up to me and said, hey young blood, like, congratulations on your first touchdown. And at that point I was just trying to get it. Like I was doing anything to even be remotely at his level. So to hear that from someone that I definitely looked up to throughout the years, it was important.
It's gonna be an amazing feeling when you have one of your idols come up to you and be, you know, what's up, young blood type of thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. I usually like to keep the word idols out of it, just because I'm the word idol is a strong word, but I definitely enjoyed being a part and watching them in their game.
That's awesome, man. Again, I appreciate you taking some time today, open up a bit about the mental side of football. I wish that, you know, as the province of Ontario reopens, that you, your friends, and your family, everybody stays safe and healthy.
Thank you. You as well, man.
And yeah, man, again, appreciate your time. And it's been a real blast to talk to you.
Appreciate that. You as well, brother. You take care of yourself.
Yeah, man. Cool. Take care, dude.